From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
On Deck is built to back small businesses like yours. Whether you're buying equipment, expanding your team, or bridging cash flow gaps, On Deck's loans up to $250,000 help make it happen fast. Rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau and earning thousands of 5-star Trustpilot reviews, On Deck delivers funding you can count on. Apply in minutes at ondeck.com. Depending on certain loan attributes, your business loan may be issued by On Deck or Celtic Bank. On Deck does not lend in North Dakota. All loans and amounts subject to lender approval.
Welcome to On Track. I'm Aisha Jaffer. It's the end of the growing season when pumpkins shrivel on porches and leaves blanket our yards. But instead of sending that organic waste to the landfill, fall can be a time to give back to the soil. Joining me is Seamus Allman, the urban horticulture manager at Louisville Grows. A lifelong Kentuckian and graduate of the University of Louisville, Seamus spent about a decade working on local community-supported agriculture farms. He's also worked in environmental education at an all-local grocery store and a seed business before joining Louisville Grows, where he now helps residents care for community gardens and build healthier soil through sustainable practices. I spoke with Seamus about composting pumpkins, reusing leaves, and how to prepare our gardens for the next season. So it's just after Halloween, and a lot of us are staring at those collapsing pumpkins on our porches. What's the best thing we can do with them, and why is that better than throwing them out?
Some people may already have a compost pile. This is an opportunity to start one if you'd like. Fall creates the opportunity for raw materials to be right there if you have pumpkins that are starting to break down or if the squirrels have already attacked them, as they do. And to make a good compost pile, you need things with the right carbon to nitrogen ratio. And so if you have something like pumpkins, other food scraps from the kitchen, and then you've got your leaves that have a lot of carbon, you've got a good recipe to get a compost pile started.
So for those who aren't familiar with composting, can you kind of explain what that is, what that means?
It's a great way to keep organic materials out of the landfill. The more organic material in the landfill, the more methane gas it produces, etc. So that impacts the people who live nearby the landfill. And so to build a good compost pile, there are, so many different approaches. If you just want to do it right there on the ground without any kind of structure, that's fine. There are a number of good composting bins that you could buy. Like some people really like the rolling ones because you're not having to turn it with a fork by hand. You can just push that roller and that mixes things together and gets the pile aerated, which is important to make sure everything is decomposing properly, but also to cut down on gas pockets and make it generally less attractive to the scavengers in your neighborhood. If you have more material and you want a bigger pile, what I've seen people do is take old pallets and then T-posts for fencing, and then just put that T-post through the pallet on 3 sides, and you've got a compost pile. And then there's ways to, paint it or whatever to make it look less like a work in progress
right.
that it is. And then it's just a matter of keeping a good mix. If you have too much carbon or if you have too much nitrogen, if you're kind of doing things, putting things in a more exclusive way, you're just not going to get that rich material with a lot of nutrients that you can use to kind of recycle back into your yard, your ornamental beds, your raised garden bed, or whatever you might have that you could use it on.
So pumpkins would be a good source for composting because of all of its kind of rich nutrients that it has. And it sounds like composting is good for not emitting methane gas, but also it sounds like there's some benefits for the soil as well.
Yes. Healthy soil is a matter of making sure you have all the nutrients that you're looking for. If you have a soil test from UK Extension or other places, you can see some of those trace minerals. So there's the importance of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that are the top 3 that people are looking for in terms of healthy soil. But there's also other smaller nutrients that by putting your compost into your soil, you are encouraging the growth of the right microbes that are so important to the life in the soil. I'm not a soil scientist, but when I talk to people soil technicians from UK or from Soil and Water, I really nerd out because it's so interesting. There's so much going on just under the ground that we have no idea about.
Yeah, and it sounds like things like this can only help it.
Absolutely.
So leaves are also starting to pile up everywhere this time of year. What do you recommend people do with them? Are there ways to put them to use that people might not expect?
So using them in your compost or using them as mulch. The tannins in the leaves are slightly acidic, but the process of them kind of breaking down over the winter, it ends up neutralizing, so it doesn't affect the pH of your soil either way. And if it did, it would be okay because a lot of lawns and a lot of ornamental plants actually prefer a slightly acidic soil. Here in Kentucky, because of all the limestone, a lot of our soil is actually slightly basic. So using your leaves in that way can be helpful. And so if you have a blower and you have ornamental beds, it saves a lot of work not having to rake. You just blow those leaves into the ornamental beds and then just let them sit all winter. It helps the soil. It creates habitat for overwintering insects. It kind of helps the whole ecosystem in different ways.
Also, just like you said, less work, which is great.
Right?
Why do the work? Are there any materials or yard waste people often forget can be reused in the fall?
Well, grass clippings, of course, we're getting into a time where we don't have to cut our grass as much. And sometimes if it stops raining for a few months, like it seems to do regularly, we can stop mowing our lawns in the middle of summer. But grass clippings are another good thing that you can use in your compost. You know, another good carbon source to go with the nitrogen you may be getting from food scraps or other things like that. More and more around here, I'm seeing people with native or perennial plants more and more in their gardens. And so as those plants go dormant and you want to clean up your garden and kind of put it to bed for the winter, you can use some of those stems and sticks and things. They will also break down over the winter. If the pile gets to the right temperature as it's composting, it generally takes about 3 months or so to go from the materials you put in to something you can put back into the soil.
That's fascinating. That's so quick.
Yeah.
When people first start composting, are there any simple do's and don'ts to keep in mind?
I've seen so many things accidentally go wrong. Like, you don't want to keep it too close to your house because it can attract vermin, and sometimes that vermin can get into your house. That's happened. I've seen. It really comes down to maintaining. If people are new to it and are not paying very close attention to it, maybe not turning it, not seeing things breaking down the way it's supposed to, and not totally understanding, the chemistry behind the process, not seeing a good finished product and saying, oh, I don't know how to do it right. It does happen fairly quickly, but it's still a slow process. Mm-hmm. And so over that 3-month period, lots of other things are happening. And so just remembering to check on it, to turn it, to have a sense of what you're putting in being in balance, then you're going to have a better chance of getting out of that nice loamy material that you can put back in.
How often should people churn it?
In a small pile, backyard composting, turning it once or twice in that 3-month period is generally enough. That also can make it easy to forget. It's like, how long has it been? Oh, it's already been 3 months.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm trying to think about, because you talk about the balance. And so you mean the balance of materials that would work together. So just getting educated on what those would be. Right.
What are your sources that are high in carbon? What are your sources that are high in nitrogen? And making sure you've got a good ratio.
And that makes it break down more efficiently?
Yes. There's different approaches to composting. And so some piles will get hotter than others. You want them to get hot enough to kill off weed seeds and bacteria, which generally is in the 140 range or so. And so if the pile doesn't get hot enough, it's not going to kill those things off. Piles can get too hot and then they can spontaneously combust. And that's not good either.
Wow. I would not have guessed that. Oh my goodness. Well, that's the chemistry you were talking about right there.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about composting, and we're going to get into garden prep. How do those fit into the work you're doing at Louisville Grows?
We are working on developing our campus a little more as a way to have a better teaching space right there on our property. We have just under an acre in Portland and have entered into a partnership with Kentucky State University on a workforce development program. So we will be working together to help train people with marketable skills that they can use in the green industry. And so that garden that we have right there, as it's developed over the next probably year or 18 months, will be a place where they can get practice. I'm partly through plowing that area up. We had planted sunflowers in it over the summer as a way to initially activate it and something that's nice to look at. And so we're going to want to amend our soil as much as possible without necessarily having to buy inputs. And so since we're planting trees and doing other landscaping projects around town, if we're pulling material out, we bring that back with us, put it in our pile, then we're making our own nutritious inputs out of waste material that we can then use in our ornamental beds around the house or out in that larger area that we're developing.
So you've worked with community gardens all over the city. What kinds of composting or soil building practices have you seen work most successfully here in Louisville?
A lot of what I see at community gardens are one large community compost pile so that as everyone's cleaning up their beds, they're all contributing. Having multiple piles or multiple bins so that you've got one that you are actively adding to. And in some cases, you might have it staged 2 or 3, one that you're adding to, another that is actively composting, and a third one that you're able to pull out of. So getting things in a rotation so that there's always something available if people are wanting to get the soil in their plot healthier.
So having kind of like a rotating system, like this is the main pile that's active, and then we have a couple prep piles to eventually put into that pile?
Possibly. Building a pile is something that can happen all at once or can happen over a period of time, and so things will have already started to break down a little bit. And so depending on what that turnover is like, how big of a garden is, how active the participants are, then you figure out the right rhythm in terms of, do we have enough material to have like 3 piles in rotation or not?
That makes sense. Okay, so as we move into this seasonal transition from fall into winter, we're already feeling it. What should Louisville gardeners be doing right now to prepare their soil, gardens, and yards?
Covering with mulch is a great way, to use some of the other waste materials from your yard or from your local tree canopy. And then depending on how your growing season is tailing out, like some people have a fall garden that they're going to continue to harvest from. Other folks, when they're done with their summer crops, they pull those out and they're good. Depending on the timing, you can, even on small pots, put in a cover crop. And I think soil and water is definitely helping folks do that. They did a cover crop workshop at our kind of community workshop space, and they handed out little packets of pre-mixed cover crop. And so that's another good way to build your soil. Add organic material back in that helps the soil structure, helps if you have more clay soil, you want to break that up a little more. So cover cropping or mulching in your vegetable or ornamental beds. In your landscaping, fall into winter is the good time to prune. You want to make sure that things are truly dormant. If people do that too early, you can have buds that develop and then a frost or freeze hits them and then damage can occur. So you don't want to do that too early. So there's subtracting and can be adding. If you want to move things around, if you want to put perennials in, fall is the best time to plant trees. Our tree planting season is getting started. These next few months every year are the best time to put things in the ground to reduce that stress that happens when you're moving plants around.
Yeah, and that sort of was a question of mine that I had is, what can you still grow at this point? And it sounds like trees and perennials. Is there anything else?
There are cold hardy vegetable crops that you can keep harvesting through the winter. And there are very simple kind of low tunnel greenhouse ideas you can use. Just a few bows over the top of your bed. It can be a thin like fabric row cover. It could be plastic. you can use a variety of materials to be able to extend your growing season and to continue to be able to harvest things further into the winter.
What are some of those cold hardy crops that you were talking about?
Broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, things in that family. The most frost hardy of those is actually Brussels sprouts. They can be a challenge to grow because they have such a long growing season. You got to plant them in August so that you can harvest them in November.
Oh, wow.
Or December, yeah. Root crops do really well. Carrots and beets, even radishes. Radishes grow really quickly. It's something you can plant kind of later in the season, and it's one of the first things you can put in the spring.
That's cool. I love that. That's a lot of good choices, honestly.
Right.
With the winter holiday season coming up, are there any best practices you would recommend when it comes to choosing, reusing, or disposing of decorations like wreaths or trees in a more sustainable way?
I believe that there are some places that will accept Christmas trees for mulching. Well, you can set them out and the city will pick them up to a limited extent.
Sure.
Yeah. So there is sending things, to the city over the holidays if the timing works out for you in terms of getting things out. And much of the yard waste that we in Louisville set out and the city picks up for us goes up to Borden, Indiana. There's a company up there called Smith Creek that makes mulches and compost. And so the stuff that we are putting into our yard waste bags can be locally available as well, which is nice. That may not always be true. The only issue with wreaths and trees and things is that they're bigger and they take longer to break down, so they're not the kind of thing that you can put into a compost pile. But what I have done in years past is, as I'm like taking the tree apart to be able to fit it out the door, if I throw things to the side for a while and let them dry out, I love having a fire in the fire pit through the winter. And so keeping some of those materials around a wood pile or whatever, that can help with some of your kindling. You might have to chop your wreath up or whatever in some way, unless you really like a big fire and you have a bucket of water nearby in case it gets out of hand. But natural processes, whether it's composting or burning, ways to keep material out of the landfill is great.
Yeah, I do remember that pine is great for a fire, especially dried out, like you said. Mm-hmm. But yeah, big fire. So be prepared for that.
Exactly.
For people who, don't have much outdoor space, maybe they live in an apartment or a more urban area, what are some ways they can still get involved in gardening or sustainability efforts?
If you live in an apartment and you have even like just a little porch of some kind, and even if you don't have that, if you just have windowsills, there are things that you can build that you can set outside the window that may have to, be affixed to the building. You might have to ask your landlord's permission. But there are plenty of things that you can still grow in a small amount of space. Herbs, of course, and in a lot of cases do really well in a pot, and there are some that can spread like mint that you actually want to keep in a pot so they don't get away. And there are bush types of some vegetable crops like tomatoes or cucumbers that you can grow in a container. And so there are opportunities if you don't have a raised bed or in-ground bed, you can still grow things that you can eat as well as herbs or flowers. And gardening indoors, of course, also improves the indoor air quality, which is very important as well.
Ooh, so many benefits. I mean, even with a garden in the back, I might want to do that. The container idea sounds really cool. I've not heard that before.
I've seen people do potatoes in buckets. There are all kinds of ways to get creative about container gardening. And I think there's more and more being written, over the last few decades, realizing that not everybody has access to a community garden or has the land themselves either way, and that this is a way for people who already have a green thumb or want to develop a green thumb.
For listeners who want to learn more, get involved, are there any local resources, volunteer opportunities, or programs you'd recommend this season?
Well, of course, I'll pitch my organization, Louisville Grows. You can come to louisvillegrows.org And we have a great contingent of volunteers who are involved in so many ways. We've planted over 8,000 trees since 2013, and we've done that with the help of a lot of volunteers. In terms of resources, the county extension, whether you're in Jefferson County or any of the surrounding counties, your county extension is always a good place to go. The Soil and Water Conservation District, those folks are specialists. Both the folks who work there and then the supervisors as well tend to be people, who work in the green industry and have a lot of expertise.
Well, Seamus, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
On Track is produced by Louisville Public Media. Our production team includes Michelle Tyreen Johnson, Laura Ellis, and me, Aisha Jaffer, with support from Sarah Kelly and Alex Biscardi. Our music is by Kojin Toshiro. Find more at LouisvilleOnTrack.org. And remember, being kind is free. That's the start of community. Thanks for listening.
Support comes from Vision Zero. On foot or behind the wheel, safety is a shared responsibility. And Vision Zero Louisville believes 0 roadway fatalities is the only acceptable amount. Their mission is to create safe roads by design, engineering solutions, and education. More information at visionzerolouisville.org.